welcome to another episode of Thinking Like a Bank, where we show you how to think like a bank by applying the same strategies and principles that banks use to help you find more financial freedom in your life. I'm your host, Sari Ibrahim. Today, I'm interviewing Grace Gong. Grace is the founder of Smart Venture Media and the host of Smart Venture Podcast, a top 10 VC podcast. Her podcast guests include many C-level executives of well-known companies, as well as investors and unicorn founders, such as the founders of Craigslist, Square, FTX, Opensea, and others. She is in the list of LinkedIn Top Voices in Finance 2022, a speaker at NFT NYC, and a #1 best-selling author on the topic of venture capital. Prior to being a founder, Grace worked in venture capital and private equity. Grace, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Sari. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm looking forward to interviewing you, going through like your LinkedIn, your bio, other places. It looks like you're doing a lot of big things in the venture capital world, crypto, NFTs. I want to kind of jump into all of those things, but before we do so, do you mind sharing with us about your background and who you are?
Yeah, totally. My name is Grace, and I was originally from China. And then when I came to the US, I didn't really have much business connections. So fast forward to today, recently I started a company. It's a media company where I interview top company executives and founders on career development, to help people who are like my younger self, who didn't really have much of a connection in the business world to, get ahead of the game. So when I moved to Silicon Valley, I realized a lot of my friends who can just run into big tech executives on their campuses. And I want to recreate that experience for just people who may not be in a geolocation that can encounter a lot of top minds in the industry to just like learn from these people. And a short like bio before starting my own media company, I worked in venture capital and private equity. And before that, I wrote 2 books where I interviewed top investors and founders on career development.
Awesome, great. Do you mind sharing with us like what exactly does a venture capital firm do or a private equity firm do?
Yeah, totally. So, I would say like venture capital firm is more maybe like more of like people's interest these days because of like it's new and then it's betting on the newest technology. And essentially what it does is like, it's betting on people with a more of a compared to, like I've listened to your podcast, like so they're more in like the small business or like people who are in the traditional sense of investing instead of like these high risk high reward type of investing. So like top VC deals you can see as like the Uber of the world or like those kind of like really high risk and high reward profile of category of things. Those typically are just like focus. So I live in Silicon Valley, so most venture capital deals I've seen are more tech oriented. So essentially it's like someone leveraging a new type of technology and then kind of like scale the way that we're doing things from the past. So like let's say if you are let's just use Uber as an example, right? Like so Uber is like someone created a piece of technology that where you could just one click and then get a car in front of your door. In the past, the traditional business is like essentially like you have to call a car company and then see if they have anything available, and then that car have to come to you from a super far place instead of just next to your door. But technology enables them to essentially like getting the most like car next to you, next to your door, and then getting them in front of you. And then instead of like, it saves a lot of waste for both like the driver as well as like the time from the customer. So a lot of technology enabled things are like venture backable companies. And essentially what people does is they are betting on these like, more is in the past, like, when you're looking at like a deal from the past, it's like, okay, so it's like the established business model, but like for startups there's more risk involved because of like people are still figuring things out. So that's like the general picture on like what it is and like what like essentially what's the difference between like VC, PE as well as like the traditional investing.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. So venture capital is more like disruptive, right? It's like breaking into the market. And I've heard that like sometimes venture capital firms, they'll invest into like 5 different companies and then assume that maybe 1 or 2 of those 5 will actually take off. And then the other 3 or 4 might not even make it. There might even be a financial loss on that side. Is that true?
Yeah, totally. So like a lot of investors would invest in like, especially the early stage investor because they're taking on way larger risk. So let's say if they had invested in 100 companies and then if let's say like five of them make it and then one of them make it huge, sometimes it can just like essentially get you all your return back within that one deal. So it's essentially like a numbers game, like
Mhm.
in a way. So I would say like people would still like, vet the team. So essentially team is like the most important things when VCs are looking at the the company as well as like, the market. So a lot of it was we have seen like in the past couple of years, like crypto has been taken off, NFT has been taken off, like so all these like kind of emerging technology has been taken off because of like the market has been getting more warmed up by these like newest like innovations.
Got it. And what are the typical ranges for like venture capital or private equity? Like what are they looking to invest? Like a range of investments, I guess.
I think it really depends on like different type of companies as well. So like like the I guess like the risk profile of like your company. So like I think consumer tech is very different than, emerging tech and as well as like, hard um like I guess like hardware technology because of
Mhm.
like the more inventory you need to make, the more likely you would need money. As well as like, it just really depends.
Oh, God. Okay. So it really depends. Yeah. This might be a broad question, but how has venture capital played a role in the crypto or NFT world?
This is like a really interesting question. I think like a lot of the I think it definitely like you can see a giant trend from like, in the past, like a NFT project is backed by the founder itself. And then right now you see a trend like a lot of VC started investing in like NFTs as well as they have been building these kind of like crypto or NFT portfolio. And I definitely see there is more of I wouldn't say competition, but like there's more of like an edge when you're getting venture backed because you are like you take a lot more risks
Mhm.
than people who are like backing it themselves. But there's definitely we've seen more like money going into the NFT or like crypto ecosystem the past 2 years.
And then is it more sometimes more advantageous to work with a venture capital because of not only the funds they're bringing, but also the connections that they may be bringing as far as like
Yeah.
marketing or other things that they've already done with other companies in the past?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely see like, especially like a lot of the investors have like their own particular focus. So like a lot of them are successful entrepreneur in like a particular category or having expertise in that domain. So when you're taking the money, you're not only taking the money, but
Yeah.
you're also taking the network as well as like the experiences that they can give you, as well as like some of the firms would help you recruit talents within the domain. So it yeah, it's like all sort of things that venture capital can empower startup to do.
Got it. And you being in like I would say like the venture capital of the world, right? In
Yeah,
Silicon Valley.
I have worked in VC before. Yeah.
Oh, God. Okay. And then you mentioned so you used to do that as an employee. Now you own your own business. Can you tell us more about your current business that you own?
Yeah, totally. So I own a media business. So like essentially one of our core product is my podcast. I run my podcast called Smart Venture Podcast where I interview top tech executives, founders, and investors on core development. Some of our past guests, including the founder of Craigslist, Square, Opensea, like a VP or C level from top tech company like Google, Meta, Amazon.
Got it. And if you have, for example, like entrepreneurs or founders of companies that are looking for funding, is this something that you can consult them on?
Uh, Yeah, I'm totally happy to give them like any advice that I could. I don't think I'm like qualified to advise on like everything, of
Yeah.
course, because yeah, each person definitely should seek like mentorship in their own domain.
And then before we started recording, you mentioned something, Web3. Do you mind sharing with us what is Web3? What does that mean?
Yeah, totally. So Web3 is essentially like, people have different opinion on like Web3, but like what I'm hearing is like essentially like, between Web1 is where you can look up on information, and then Web 2 is where you can, come in and interact with that piece of information, and Web 3 is essentially you have the ownership of it. So like, let's say, in Web 1, let's say you hear a Taylor Swift song, and then Web 2 you can, purchase this song from like, Spotify or something. And then in Web 3 you can get a piece of ownership. Let's say you are Taylor Swift's like early supporter, you can buy like a Taylor Swift coin, and then essentially when Taylor took off, you can get the financial reward from it. So Web 3 is like a lot of focus on the ownership piece. So that's like how I understand it. And right now, like different people have different perspective on this, but I personally just see it as a third wave of like revolution, as like, in Web 1 we have those like the most like early stage like tech companies, like, and then Web 2 we have, the different kind of apps that we could use. And then in Web 3 it's like a new different realm of technology that's gonna like change how people interact with like with each other.
Got it. Okay. And then you mentioned that you wrote two books. What are the names of those books?
So The Last Key to Success and How to Be a VC.
Okay, awesome. I'm definitely gonna check out those books. Are they on Kindle? Right.
I believe, yeah, I believe they are.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, Grace, it was really nice interviewing you. How can listeners learn more about you and what you're doing?
I'm on LinkedIn. It's Grace Gong, and then I'm on Twitter. It's Grace Gong GG. And they can also find my podcast on Apple, Spotify, and anything else. It's called Smart Venture Podcast.
Awesome. I'll be sure to add in those links you mentioned in the show notes below. And I'm looking forward to bringing you back on the podcast.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
To learn more about what we do and how we can help you grow more wealth, please visit www.finassetprotection.com. That's FIN, assetprotection.com. The topics presented in this podcast are for general information only and not for the purposes of providing legal, accounting, or investment advice. On such matters, please consult a professional who knows your specific situation.